Mr. Jonathan Parker graduated from the University of Redlands with degrees in political science and psychology before earning a master's degree in American government from American University in Washington, D.C. He has been a teacher in the Glendale Union High School District since 1995, and he has served as the AP U.S. History teacher at Thunderbird High School for the past 15 years. Since 2003, Mr. Parker has acted as the mentor on assignment at Thunderbird, providing instructional coaching and facilitating professional development workshops for teachers new to the district. Throughout his career, Mr. Parker has been an assistant varsity football coach while also completing stints as a baseball and track coach. As an active member of the GUEA, Mr. Parker has been elected to local and state positions, including current roles in the GUEA, as the GUEA President and the sole teacher representative on the State Board of Education's Professional Practices Advisory Committee. Most recently, Mr. Parker was recognized to the Arizona Educational Foundation as an Ambassador of Excellence for 2014, and that was the video that you just saw. So congratulations on that again, Mr. Parker. Finally, Mr. Parker is the grateful son of 2 teachers, the proud father of 2 extraordinary children, and the fortunate husband of a wife he does not deserve. Now, I want everyone to know that I did not write that. It was handwritten this morning when I got here, and I believe, I can only guess that it was due to a last-minute email by Mrs. Parker. But he could tell us that. Please join me in welcoming our GUEA President, Mr. Jonathan Parker.
Humiliation. It's been an interesting year. I've enjoyed the opportunity to go to a number of places and give a number of speeches, and it's been very humbling. But it has been wonderful to serve as an advocate, taking your stories with me and reminding people what it is we do. Thank you. I am a middle-aged man who works at his old high school. Now, depending on the lenses through which you see the world, that is either selfless devotion to one's community or a tragic cautionary tale. Think back to your own high school experience for a moment. Now imagine returning to work with people who knew you from the ages of 14 to 18. I don't know about you, but I feel like I owe an apology to everyone I ever met from the ages of 14 to 18. Nothing specific, just, I'm sorry. It's hard enough to earn the respect of your peers and colleagues. It's exponentially more difficult if they knew you between those ages. And if, hypothetically, you may have damaged one of their cars. Or 2. I'm sorry. But because I'm a middle-aged man who works at his old high school, I have a great line that I get to use on kids. If they are off task or if they are coasting, I can say to them, you know, I used to be like you once. And look at me now. One day, all this could be yours. At this point in my career, I find myself standing on this expansive Glendale Union High School District generational bridge. As I look in one direction, I can see the faces and hear the voices of those who have shaped my career path. Though I only spent 1 year at Independence High School, my DNA was fundamentally altered by the professional generosity of Lee Pfeiffer, by the nurturing brilliance of Cherry Buffington, by the humor and kindness of Eric Zimmerman. Colleagues with whom I have never shared a school, increasingly, are impacting my life. I find myself talking more and more like Vic Johnson. How we doing? I start dispensing wisdom in Perron-sized portions. I hope one day that I can master the patience of Phyllis Gendreau, that I can have the jovial exuberance of Greg Parrish, or that I can continue to be guided by the moral compass of Hal Anders. From where I stand now, they remain a gravitational force pulling me towards excellence. But from this position, as a middle-aged man standing on a generational bridge, more and more frequently I find myself gathering with former students as we say goodbye to treasured teachers. In the past 3 years, I've lost the two most significant high school teachers that had the most profound impact. Now, the truth of the matter is I was a difficult student in high school. I wasn't a bad student, I was just challenging. I was the type of student who calculated the exact amount of effort that he needed to give in order to get the desired grade, and then I gave no more than that. Perhaps you know a student like that. Perhaps you were a student like that. High school and AP classes in particular were sport. I wanted to see if I could write essays without ever reading the book. Now, the answer is, of course, just not well. Dr. Ray Sargent taught AP English at Thunderbird High School. For those of you who did not know Ray Sargent, he greeted students on day one with a quote from Dante. He said, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." He would go in his later years to prospective junior classes wearing the mask donned by Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. You can see where this story is going. Dr. Sargent had me pretty well figured out even before I got to his class. Following one shot-in-the-dark essay where I had read like half of Invisible Man, he handed back my work with a surprisingly high grade. And as my customary smirk began to form, he humbled me by saying, "An infinite number of monkeys on an infinite number of typewriters, one of them will produce Hamlet." I thought it was a compliment. He had taken to calling me Puck, a benign but mischievous character from Shakespearean literature. But the joke was on him because I told you I didn't read anything. I'd never read Hamlet. So when I began to continue the pattern, I attempted to write an essay after reading only 3 pages of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. If you've ever read it, well, you know what I'm talking about. The result was a little bit more predictable this time. He handed back my paper, and the grade that I received was probably appropriate, but no less alarming. And I threw up my hands to him, and I said, "Monkeys, typewriters, Hamlet!" To which he responded wearily, in a voice that 20 years later I understand a little bit better. "Puck, an infinite number of monkeys on an infinite number of typewriters. One of them will produce Hamlet, but most of them are typing shit." I will seek forgiveness later. Dr. Sargent saw through me, challenging me to become what I ought to be. I am better because Ray Sargent was my teacher. This past year, we lost Jane McSpadden, treasured friend and beloved teacher, to a battle with cancer. But her life is a testament to the powerful legacy of a teacher. When I arrived at Thunderbird High School as a freshman, I was 100 pounds of nervous mess. I was new to the state, new to the school, and searching to find my place. Mac made Thunderbird my home. My best recollections of high school all come from friendships she helped cultivate. She was instrumental in my life, nurturing courage and shaping my path. As Ms. Kennedy indicated earlier, I don't know that I could remember a single lesson from her class, but I don't think that would offend her. The reality is that 4 decades of students would all say the same thing. She made a lasting impact on my life. I am better because of her. At this moment, you all stand on the generational bridge with me. This is our moment in time, and the climate demands something from us. You are both the infrastructure of the present and the architects of tomorrow. So let me pose a question. Regardless of where you are in your career or what position you hold in the district, when you reflect on your legacy, what do you see? Do you see buildings? Do you see data? Or do you see faces? In a perfect world, every teacher would be able to end his or her career with a climactic scene from Mr. Holland's opus. Or at the very least, after a really good lesson, children jump up on the desks and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." If you're new to the district, don't worry, that doesn't happen till like year 3. But at the very least, perhaps we could all get a montage set to music. So I ask, what's in your montage? Part of the reason that we are so important at this particular time and place is because of the climate in which we operate. Our collective frustration with school reform comes from people who ask the wrong questions or offer the wrong remedies. We must shout down false prophets who offer remedies in search of a disease. At the best, faulty remedies are ineffective. At worst, they are menacing and destructive, exacerbating problems or creating entirely new ones. It is time for the grown-ups to take back control of the conversation. By reframing the conversation, we reclaim our profession to those who have given it to us. How do we reclaim, or how do we reframe the discussion? In today's world, that's not easy. For all of the democratization of social media, it has led to a quest for immediate validation and instant celebrity. We have lost appreciation for mastery of a craft over time. Ain't nobody got time for that. When the volume of one's argument is confused with its quality, we need a change. When nuanced debate and thoughtful discussion yield to character limits and hashtags, we need a change. When ESPN covers where a 17-year-old signs a letter where he intends to play a sport but never covers the graduation ceremony when the child graduates, we need a change. In a time where more people in America can name more Kardashians than cardiologists, we need a change. Now, throughout this speech, I admit I am shamelessly pandering to English teachers, which should be unnecessary. I mean, if you want to make any English teacher grin from novice to curmudgeon, you only need 4 words. Similes are like metaphors. Once again, my 11-year-old's favorite line. Let's start by discussing word choice then. If we are to reframe the discussion, we need to change the verbs. When we say children are going to school to get an education, we have minimized their role and responsibility, reducing them to idle participants. Teachers ladling out knowledge hour by hour in dollops. People used to pursue an education. Now they receive an education. Let's reframe that. And when did we begin to accept the word struggling as an adjective, struggling schools as a term? Unless it is accompanied by some sort of lesson on personification, we shouldn't say struggling schools. Schools are inanimate objects. Schools cannot struggle. Students within schools can struggle, so perhaps we should design remedies to help them. The word sufficient should no longer be a descriptor that we place in front of the words education or funding. Sufficient means the absolute bare minimum. No parent dreams that their child will live a sufficient life or have a sufficient education. In fact, let's conduct an experiment. Next time you go out to a restaurant, order a steak. And when the server asks you questions, you say, you know what, I don't want the grade A beef tonight. Go to the back and see if you can find something that is sufficient. Perhaps there's a box back there that says, fit for human consumption. Cook it however you want, just make it brown-ish. We know that the #1 predictor of student success is the extent to which the parent is meaningfully involved in a child's education. We know this. And this is why penalties that are inflicted on teachers or labels on schools are so distressing. For too long, advocates of public education have bemoaned insufficient funding, while critics of public education have lamented insufficient results. It creates this never-ending game of philosophical tennis. Perhaps it's time to reframe the question. But before doing so, if I could score one last smash. If Arizona reaches the bottom of per-pupil spending in the United States, can we agree then that it's time to change course? Otherwise, you're going to need a shovel. If we get to a point that chasing Mississippi becomes our mantra for anything, we've done something horribly wrong. What other professions would we consider doing on the cheap? Public safety? Airline safety? Air traffic control? Let's put that out to low bid. This is not a problem that only afflicts us, but plagues all public employees. And it starts from a catastrophic misunderstanding of math. If you want top flight service, you cannot pay bargain basement prices. If the community wants the best, that might involve taxes. You can't go to heaven without dying. That seemed like kind of a dark line for applause. Instead of asking about funding schools and whether or not they're adequately funded, in every conversation you have as this election approaches, ask this question: what should Arizona schools look like? Because the only reasonable sentence to follow that should be, schools should be cathedrals, houses of community worship, dedicated to our promise in tomorrow and our vision for our children. If we can agree on a vision for what schools should look like, then the funding part is easy. Similarly, for what problem is pay for performance the remedy? Educators bemoan merit pay and performance pay because at root, they suggest that we're holding something back, that perhaps next year we'll try a little bit harder. Let's agree on this as well. For everyone who proposes an idea with economic roots, start the conversation with this. Can we agree that teachers are not rational economic actors? Any remedy that you have that assumes that teachers are going to work harder for pay assumes that they're already working harder and getting paid. But if that was the case, then it would only be ineffective. But consider this scenario. You've got a student at your high school, a senior who's struggling in class, and insert your favorite adolescent boogeyman here. Teen pregnancy, drug use, family illness, homelessness. The child has not done well over her senior year, and now it's time for assessments. One teacher wants her out of class because the student's not going to perform well, and that's going to hurt the teacher's evaluation. Another teacher throws up her hands and says, I don't care. I'm happy to have her. Every day that she is here is a victory. So I ask you, which teacher do you want at your school? Which teacher would you want for your child? And perhaps most importantly, a year from now, which teacher will be rewarded by the evaluation system? When people complain that teachers get plenty of money, stifle the giggling, and then ask this question: what have we done since 2008 to incentivize this profession? What have we done since 2008 to entice new teachers or to retain veteran teachers? If we continue to disincentivize this profession, we will continue to put faith in the belief that teachers will come back always because it is a calling. But we're at a tipping point. Teachers may not be rational economic actors, but we cannot continue to pay teachers through withdrawals from the bank of benevolence. Good teachers are leaving. They are leaving. There are vacant seats next to you where a good teacher once sat. They cannot pay the mortgage. They cannot insure their families. They cannot pay off their loans, and they cannot make ends meet. We are not enticing people from other professions. We are chasing our own to other professions. So in the midst of this tumult and uncertainty, we must recognize the dignity and celebrate the nobility of this profession. As the perception of education changes and the tools to measure a teacher's effectiveness evolve, we must reclaim the definition of our profession. We are entrusted to shape lives. This is what we do. In 1999, I met Ronnie Cho. Ronnie, son of Korean immigrants, remains to this day the funniest kid and one of the bravest kids I've ever met. For example, during his senior year, he hatched this idea that he was going to ask his secret crush to prom while wearing a suit of armor. Since the stunt would occur in my class, I was going to help him navigate the breezeway back to my room after lunch. And as he clunked and ambled through the halls, his friend stopped him to deliver the bombshell. Somebody else asked her at lunch, Ronnie. I know. He was crestfallen. You can imagine his head actually drooping, and then comically the visor followed. But undeterred, he continued this walk to my room, and it was hilarious because the suit of armor, as you might imagine, was a little too large. Apparently, suits of armor aren't made in various sizes, like 1 or 2, and neither of them are small Korean boy. So Ronnie continued off to my classroom, dropped to a knee, and asked an entirely different girl. Cool kid, right? Terrific kid. Never turned in a thing. During his junior year, when he was in my class, he came to me after spring break and he said, Mr. Parker, I have a D in your class. A D, Mr. Parker. Did you know that I have a D? And I said, yes, Ronnie, I've been here the whole time. I've watched it. Now, let me tell you a little metaphor about typewriters and monkeys. Ronnie finally did well in AP History. He ventured off to ASU, took an interest in politics, worked on some campaigns here in Arizona, and then in 2007 he went to Iowa to work on a then junior senator's run for the Oval Office. A few years later, he found himself in the White House. And now 2 years ago, a group of colleagues and I, we went to a conference in Washington, D.C., where we had the opportunity to tour the West Wing of the White House, led by Ronnie. We saw the Oval Office, we saw the Rose Garden, we posed for pictures in the press briefing room, and you can actually bowl and have a beer at the old executive office building. It's kind of cool. But the best part of the trip occurred 2 nights later. After the 4th of July, we went out and saw fireworks on the mall, and we came back to an establishment to have dinner. And Ronnie was there with a handful of his friends. He brought his friends over to us, his teachers. And he turned to his friends and he said, "These are my teachers. They helped make me who I am today." 13 years had passed since Ronnie had been in any of our classrooms. We came to find out later that the people he introduced to us were the White House Deputy Chief of Staff and Obama's chief speechwriter. He had brought them to us, not the other way around. It was a powerful reminder of the impact of an educator. Now, people outside this room, they think they understand our profession and they know that we impact children's lives. But what many of them will never know is the extent to which the children can also impact ours. This is my friend Salo. Salo played catcher for what was, from a baseball standpoint, a relatively unremarkable JV baseball team. I know, I'm being redundant. All JV baseball teams are, by definition, unremarkable. Unless we can gather them 20 years from now and find out what they've become. In the middle of one particularly challenging workout, Salo struggled mightily and could not complete the practice, which was unusual for him. Within 48 hours, his teammates took the field, learning that their teammate and friend, Salo, had been diagnosed with leukemia. The 18 months that followed were both tragic and inspirational. Salo's courage and selflessness inspired a community. When the Make-A-Wish Foundation offered Salo an opportunity to fulfill a wish, he declined. He indicated he had everything he needed, thank you very much, and wondered if it'd be okay if he were to donate his wish to a cause that he believed in, Doctors Without Borders. From that moment on, one of the side effects of his illness was how the charity of his spirit somehow infected those around him. He pulled out the best of his peers, a contagious outbreak of generosity and selflessness, a bone marrow drive at the high school, the creation of Team Salo for Relay for Life, a feature story on Fox Sports Arizona. He befriended Eric Burns, or Eric Burns befriended him. Jason Mraz performed at his hospital bed. E.J. Montini wrote an article. The truth of the matter is, in those 18 months, Salo's circle of friends and influence expanded exponentially, making each of us a little better along the journey. When he passed near Thanksgiving 2008, the community he left behind was inspired, galvanized, and deeply wounded. Due dates changed, priorities shifted. For the teachers of that senior class, their job was no longer to push those who would fly. We had to catch those who would fall. Salo's story is a reminder that we are not about data, we are about children. Like Ronnie, Salo retains a prominent place in my montage. And as I close, I am a middle-aged man who stands on a generational bridge that affords me a stunning view. When I look to the left, I see the teachers who inspired me. Look a little further, and I see those colleagues who shaped me as a novice. The company I keep now with you includes the students who return as adults and remind us why what we do is so important. But then I look to my right, and there she is. You know that this picture was taken some time ago, because my children are looking at the camera rather than rolling their eyes at their father. This year, Glendale Union High School District will welcome a typical goofy 14-year-old girl. That's what you see. I see her first steps. I see her every Halloween costume. I see the moment when she was 3 and had this snow globe that she loved so much that unfortunately was made out of glass. And when she dropped it, I watched it shatter and scatter, and then I looked at her face, and the dawning realization that it wasn't coming back. The heartbreaking pathos that accompanies those crocodile tears that children can shed that only every once in a while are genuine. And she turned to me first with a question, followed up immediately by a statement, where she said, "Daddy, fix it? Daddy, fix it." Daddy couldn't fix it. This is my daughter. This year she steps onto our bridge and into your classrooms. In the fall of 2000, for the first time, my wife and I handed her over to the care of someone outside of our immediate family. At that moment, more than any before or since, I realized what an extraordinary act of faith it is to hand your most precious, your most beloved, to someone else's care. And although it is unlikely that my daughters will be in most of your classrooms, I want you to approach this year the same way. I want you to treat every day as if they are sitting in the front row. I don't want you to allow a single moment of their window of time to be wasted. Share with them the quiet beauty of art. Move them with music and dare them to dance. Stir their souls with stories of grief and courage. Unlock the wonders of science. Implore them to imagine and coax them to create. Be demanding, patient, compassionate, and inspirational. Every day, parents routinely and unceremoniously drop their most prized packages off, entrusting them to our care. And every day, we must be worthy. Our legacy as educators will never be measured by student scores, and it will never be reflected in our paychecks. Rather, our legacy will be measured by the impact that we have on the lives of others. I am a middle-aged man who works at his old high school. And like all of you who are devoted to this noble endeavor of nurturing children, I have been blessed to enjoy a life of extraordinary meaning. When you leave here today, continue to build your montage. Reframe the discussion of educational reform by demanding that we do nothing to mitigate or compromise the exceptional importance of an educator. You alter the arc. You transform the trajectory of lives. I treasure you, my friends, my colleagues, my daughter's teachers. Thank you.